Uh-oh, I always say to the cloud, right?
Recording in the cloud.
Yeah. And then I can download it from the cloud. Sorry. Try again.
All right, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
We're going to get started. Welcome to the first leadership discussion session of 2021. This is something that Joel and I have wanted to do for a very long time, and we finally got our act together, thanks to Sam and Amy and Stephanie, Elizabeth, and Nicole. It took somebody else to help us get our act together to get something done around here. So the plan is to do these every first and third Monday. We'll see how this 4:30 time works out and go from there. The plan is to go no longer than 5:15, but the truth is I have no idea if this is going to take 15 minutes or 2 hours. So as you know, again, as we get closer to the summer months, we'll make a decision, see how it's going, whether we want to continue through the summer months, depending on schedules and just how that works out. The advantage of doing it virtually and in person is, you know, we can reach as many people as we need to. Now, something we didn't announce beforehand, we are recording these sessions, so they will be available afterwards to those. But at the moment, I think we've got 45 people on Zoom and 25-ish here, and maybe a couple in the conference room. So listen, I appreciate your time. We think leadership is something that is extremely important, and it's a topic that is often misunderstood. So today is really going to be kind of just laying the groundwork and the basis for the rest of the year. We're going to be taking information from books, from our own experiences, from advice from a lot of you guys and ladies in the company, and hopefully we're going to make each session worthwhile. Obviously, everybody's time is valuable, and we don't want to waste any time. So we're also going to be giving out some books throughout the year, starting with one that we're going to either, for those in person, we're going to give them to you when we're finished today. It's homework for the next session, and then as we go throughout the year, we'll be giving out a couple other sessions. So if you notice, I use the word discussion. That means it's interactive. For those of you in person, if you have a question, just let me have it, okay? And we'll try to address those. For those of you on Zoom, use the chat function. We've got Stephanie is monitoring the chat function. So if you have a question, I'll get her to throw something at me or scream or, you know, I don't know, stab me in the back with a pen, get my attention. So we can try to address any questions. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end if we need to as well to answer any questions. So we're recording, correct?
Yes, sir.
So let's get started. So what we're calling this is just leadership the GSM way. All right. I've studied a lot about leadership and different topics over the years, and the question that often comes up when I'm listening to a podcast or reading a book: are leaders born or are they made? I happen to use the phrase, can they be developed? So are leaders born or can they be developed? So that's the first interactive question. All right, heard developed? Both? Okay. So of all my studies and reading, we can be born with certain traits that may help someone more easily become a better leader. But generally speaking, leaders are developed over time. So leaders and leadership is something that is basically, it is made over time. You don't just pop out of the womb as a great leader. unless maybe you're Dora the Explorer. If you don't have young children in the last 20 years, sorry, you can look up who Dora the Explorer is. So that's an important point, though. I've had people tell me otherwise, that they think if you're not born a certain manner, you cannot be a good leader. Well, I've learned and seen, and I think we have individuals here that have proven that that's not the case. So without a doubt, I think leaders can be or are made over time. So being an engineer, I wanted to look up what is leadership. So what is the definition of leadership? So I went to Webster. This is what Webster said. As defined by Webster, leadership is the office or position of a leader, capacity to lead. Well, that meant absolutely nothing to me, right? If you don't know what the word lead means, but that's literally what was in the dictionary. So then, what's next? What does it mean? What does lead mean? And that is lead, not led, as Mark Benton made sure I was aware of recently. So lead means to guide on a way, especially by going in advance, to direct on a course or in a direction, to direct the operations, activity, or performance of, to have charge of. So look at that for a second. The thing I want to point out about that is in that very first one, it says by going in advance. That means out front, being first. To direct on a course or in a direction. So to try to simplify a little bit, some of my favorite synonyms for lead: coach, shepherd, mentor, show, counsel, guide, precede, among others that you can look up. But the one I actually probably personally like the most is probably shepherd. I think shepherd is a terrific word that describes what I believe leadership is. Precede is another good one. You know, precede means, again, doing things out front. Leadership doesn't happen from the rear for the most part. Okay? So, what or who do you think of when you think of the word leader? So, real quick, clear your mind. What comes into your mind and your vision when you think of the word leader? I did this exercise, and I'm going to show you what came to my mind first. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the movie 300. This happens to be the actor that played Leonidas. If you're interested in history at all, it is worth studying about the Battle of Thermopylae, if I pronounced that correctly, where the Spartans battled Xerxes and the Persians. It's really an interesting story. You know, literally they claimed that there were 300 Spartans. Militarily, you could argue that it was a complete and total disaster, but it was a pretty heroic and feat for 300 Spartans to go up against the Persian army. So for me, just without putting much thought into it, that's the image that came to my mind of a leader. And I'll also say that that's the image that came to my mind, unfortunately. Because that type of leadership is unfortunately maybe what most people think of, right? But it's not the leadership that typically is going on day to day. And that's not the typical leadership where progress occurs day to day. That's just spectacular, historical, military, you know, type of leadership. So what type of person or who do you think of when you think of someone who is a leader? So historically, think of people like George Washington, military leaders. Of course, if anybody wants to disagree with any of this, throw it out here. Abraham Lincoln. You know, unfortunately, I put political leaders up there. Maybe you could argue this day and time, I'm not so sure, but they should be. They're viewed as leaders. By the time we get through with this, I hope we look back and can see that maybe most of our political people that we look up to, maybe they might not match the definition of leadership that where we're going to end up. Martin Luther King Jr., Alexander the Great, Winston Churchill, Joan of Arc, Mahatma Gandhi, Jesus Christ, King David, St. Paul, Genghis Khan, Napoleon Bonaparte. So when you look at that list, man, that's a lot of different type of personalities, a lot of different methods of leadership, a lot of different things that each one accomplished. And you look at some of those names, you might see that historically, they might not be viewed so positively. Leadership just means you're helping people get things done. All right, doesn't necessarily mean that it was good. But we're going to get to that eventually as well over the next few months about the difference between an effective leader and a virtuous leader. Those are two different things. Does anybody disagree with anybody on that list, or is that? I'm sure that Mahatma Gandhi and Genghis Khan being on the same list might surprise a few people.
Dave Case added president and pastor.
Okay, thank you. That's terrific. If you didn't hear that, Dave Case added president and pastor. So I'll try to repeat that so we get something online or vice versa. If you guys have a question, I'll make sure to remind me to repeat that so anybody on Zoom can hear that. So what kind of traits define a leader? Or that some traits of great leaders are things they do consistently. Okay. For those in Zoom, Stephen Sykes added instill positive change. Coach. What about set example by actions and behavior? Yes, no, maybe? How about taking action and initiative? What does that mean? Okay, move. Start. Initiative is something we're going to come back to.
Dave says experience, always looking ahead, and to motivate.
Okay, thank you. Listen. Why would listen be on a list of leadership traits? Not everybody at once.
You may not be aware of a problem if you're not listening to the people around you. The thing about leadership is surround yourself with people smarter and better than you are.
That's correct. So for those on Zoom, repeat that again, Mark, so I can repeat it back a little better.
You may not be aware of what the problem is.
Yeah.
If you're not listening to the people around you.
Yeah, sometimes leaders are not aware of what's going on around them if they're not listening to those around them, and you don't have people around them that are willing to tell them the truth and talk to them, then they can miss out, and if they're not listening properly. They also have to be humble enough to listen. Without that humility to listen, you can have some other issues.
Nicole Burgess says
Serving, service for sure. Consistency of behavior. Empathetic. Why would I have empathy up there? Empathetic. Does everybody know what that means? What does empathy mean? To be able to show empathy.
Connection with someone's problem or issue.
Okay. Be able to put yourself in their shoes. I know when I was younger, I used to get empathy and sympathy mixed up and confused, or I thought they were the same. The big difference between sympathy and empathy. Yeah, empathy is being able to put yourself in other people's shoes and kind of understand their situation, understand what they're dealing with. Always learning. That kind of goes back to humility, understand that you don't know everything. Good leaders. One of my favorite quotes, I'm paraphrasing, goes something like this, that every reader isn't a leader, but every leader is a reader. And you could expand that just to say every leader is a learner. This day and time, there's so many other ways that we have to learn besides reading. As much as I despise some of the things on them internets, we have the opportunity at a click of a button to pretty much find information out on any topic possible. But leaders are always learning. Integrity. What does that mean? Doing the right thing when no one's looking. So good leaders have integrity. Inspire others. How do leaders inspire others, and what does that mean?
Set an example that people want to emulate.
Okay, good. Yeah, set an example. People are always watching. I learned that the hard way when I had children. They're watching what you're doing more than they're listening to what you're saying. And I think that's the same here in any type of leadership opportunity. Vision. What in the world does that mean? That's a tough one.
Be able to see the bigger picture.
Okay, being able to see the bigger picture.
We're trying to coach where we headed.
Okay, where are we headed?
A vision for way for your guys or yourself to achieve.
Yeah. What do we want to achieve? Help them understand. How do they articulate that vision? Articulate, I can barely spell that, much less understand what it means. Okay. Yeah, say it in an understandable way. That's a good one. We're going to come back to that one in a few minutes. Persuade. Persuade's an interesting one because that can be really used in a detrimental way when you're in a position of leadership. You have to be able to persuade, but done too much or done in the wrong way can really lead to some very specific issues in the long run. Leaders have to have discipline. I find discipline hard. You know, but that's one that's really important. Self-awareness. That's an interesting topic, and one that's kind of come more to light, I say, in the last 5 or 10 years, when it concerns not just leadership but personality in general. Anybody tell me what comes to mind when you hear that phrase, self-awareness?
Recognize your own shortcomings, where you can improve yourself.
It can be recognizing your own shortcomings.
Are you aware of how you make people feel?
Yes. Are you aware of how you make people feel and how you impact the people around you day to day? That's ultimately what self-awareness is about. For most people, I shouldn't say for many, I should say for many people, that's a real blind spot. And by definition, a blind spot is just something you can't see yourself. And it takes others to maybe point it out to you. I was very, very non-self-aware for a very long time about my shortcomings and how I was impacting people negatively around me. It took some being humbled many times and some people to point out things I could improve on to help to get past that. Enthusiasm, being enthusiastic about whatever. Accountable. Ooh. Who likes to be held accountable? Not me. You set some standards, you set some core values, try to hold the line, try to be accountable for that. Having high standards and being accountable to them is hard. All right, but good leaders, that's exactly what they do. What they do. Persistent. How does that relate to leadership? Being persistent.
They don't quit when it gets tough.
Don't quit. A real popular way that's been put the last few years is having grit. In fact, there's a great book called it's called Think and Grow Rich, and it was a book that was written over about a 25-year period, and some of the most successful people in history of the United States were studied over a 25-year period. And the one, when he was asked, if you read the book, the one trait that came out of that for the most successful people was grit and persistence. That was the number one thing that all of the most successful people had in common, was the tenacity not to quit. Humility. So we've touched on that already, but humility is really important. It kind of goes to that always learning. But if you're not humble in a position of leadership, it's going to be very difficult to have anybody follow you. Because people that are around you, if you're not humble, that is going to get sniffed out very quickly. They'll get sniffed out. Maybe one way to put that would be, the people you hang around with that are the know-it-alls. Okay, the know-it-alls, or they always the what I call the outdoers. Every time you talk about something, or they've done something better, or they've done something harder, or they've done something, those type of personality traits are not typically what you see people follow. Any others you can think of that we should have added?
Charlie McGinnis says, when you see something that needs to be done, do it.
Ooh, when you see something that needs to be done, do it. Yikes. Well, I could tell you some good ones about that. Simple things like, I don't know, trash in the parking lot, going home and, oh Lord, you got dishes in the sink. Uh-oh. Maybe if I ignore them, I don't look at them, they'll just magically get cleaned. Yeah, that typically doesn't happen, does it? Trash needs to be taken out. Are we leaders at home? Not just, sometimes we don't associate leadership, this type of leadership, with the leadership that's needed at home or when you leave here. It's the exact same thing. Exact same thing. Of course, that's what we have kids for, right? To do all that stuff for us.
Theo Doe says positive impact.
Absolutely. Positive impact.
Austin Stanley says mental fortitude.
Mental fortitude.
DJ says forgiveness.
Ooh, forgiveness. Yikes. So who likes to forgive others that have wronged you? I'll lower my hand on that one. Yeah, to the positive impact point, we're making, whether you realize it or not, that kind of goes to self-awareness. You are making an impact on the people around you, whether you realize it or not. All right, good leadership requires you to become self-aware of the type of impact you are having and then being intentional about that impact. You are already having impact. When I was younger, I had no clue how I was impacting the people around me. And very often, it wasn't very good impact. It was not very positive impact. And the reason is I just didn't realize, me? I mean, how could I be affecting other people? I'm just living my own little world and doing my own little thing. I mean, how is that even possible for me to be making an impact on somebody? So if you think you're not, you might have a lack of self-awareness. What skills are required, basically, What skills are required for an effective leader to move a group or organization toward advantage? I use that sentence in that, framed in that fashion. If you notice Purple Haze, that's very Q sources. A lot of this comes from Q source, what we're getting ready to see. Everything that we do as a leader should be moving the group, the organization, your team, yourself toward advantage. That means getting better, improving. If there's a vision that has been articulated properly, then everything we do, everything an effective leader is doing is helping us get closer to that vision. That right there might be the ultimate definition of leadership. This was on the list earlier, but vision. When I see that word and I try to relate it to leadership, the first thing that comes to mind for me is that's just too big. That means that's people like the president, or I don't know, somebody that are doing things that I'm not doing, that I'm not involved with. However, every single day that we get up at GSM, we come to work, we're going to a job site, we're taking phone calls, we're planning the day for hiring. Every single day, we have a vision in our head of what's going to happen. Every single day. Now, you might not view it that way. You might not think of it in that terms. Chris, you go out to a job site with you and your guys, you've got some idea of what's supposed to happen, right? And it's that is part of the leadership. It's not just Joel and I trying to lay out this 10-year vision for where the company is going. And don't get me wrong, that's extremely important, and that is part of our job. But it's no less important than what Chris and his crew is doing every single day. Because this vision that Joel and I are talking about maybe will never happen if Chris and his team isn't going out and doing the daily vision for that job. Plan of action meetings, plan of attack meetings. We're trying to create a vision of how this job is going to go. Right? We have a what to expect emails and texts that we send out to customers. We're creating a vision in their head of what's going to happen. And my goodness, we better deliver on that vision, or what's the point, right? So this is the first of the 4 leadership skills. All leaders have a vision. All leaders have a vision. One that projects something better and the path to get there. One that projects something better and a path to get there. And I just threw some words, some synonyms: foresight, dream, imagination, perspective, outlook. Yeah, some days that vision seems like a dream, doesn't it? When we show up at that job site, oh Lord, what was that salesman dreaming about when he sold us this one? But vision, without vision, you're not going to move toward advantage. You're not going to move your team, the organization, yourself towards something better that's in that vision. So that's actually, believe it or not, in leadership, that's the easy part. Having a vision about where you're headed, how it's going to be better, is the easy part. Here comes the hard part. Articulation. It was on that list earlier about articulate. Articulation sounds easy, but man, getting that vision out so everybody can clearly understand it and then go act upon it. The best leaders are willing and able to clearly articulate their vision in a way that can be easily understood and remembered. Dan, I think you said that pretty much earlier when we were talking about that. The best leaders are willing and able to clearly articulate their vision in a way that can be easily understood and remembered. Statement, vocalization, delivery, expression. If you're a good leader, your vision shouldn't be a secret. Hey, we've got these great ideas, man. We're going down there. But let's don't tell anybody. Oh, man. Because what can happen if you articulate the vision? What are the things? What are the results that can come from articulating a vision? You got to do it, possibly.
Kickback.
Get pushback, kickback. If it's not clear, what can happen? The wrong thing can happen.
BJ says you can be successful.
Oh, here we go. So I heard, it's interesting how sometimes we naturally go to the negative on stuff like that. You might just be successful if you articulate it clearly. But it also got, to Mark's point, you got something to live up to now. You got, holy moly. Let's set some core values and not live up to them. As a percentage, on day to day, I wonder how many of these core values we really live up to. I mean, I'm 100%. I don't know about you guys. I mean, I'm always 100%. Heidi laughs. That's great.
Say something about humility.
Oh, boy. Exactly. We'll get to later in a couple sessions later, we're going to talk about candor, how important it is with leadership and teams. I've learned Heidi has no problem being candid with me, and it's very helpful. It's very helpful. So you got to be able to articulate it. I'm going to use this word again, persuasion, because persuasion is important, but it's also can be, as I mentioned earlier, it can be a really slippery slope. Because underlying under persuasion is trust. The next level leader is able to persuade others to follow him or her in their vision. It is the ability to initiate movement toward the vision he has articulated to his group. So alignment, exhortation, conversion, force, inducement. It is the ability to initiate movement toward the vision. So Dana has a job, had a POA, they created this vision. They go out with the team, and by God, how do we make sure that we articulate that clearly to get the job done on time? Because at that moment, Dana's the leader in charge of making sure that gets done. I bring up the stuff like that we're doing every day, whether it's Stephen Van Syak or Jason McDaniel or Dan or whomever on a service, even down to a service call, especially when you guys are training somebody. We have to be able to articulate it and then persuade the team to go out and do it. Initiative. So initiative is the last of what I'm calling the last of the 4 traits of effective leaders. So this one is super important for a lot of different reasons. The best leaders initiate action without having to be told by others what is necessary. The best leaders initiate action without having to be told by others what is necessary. Initiative is defined as an introductory step, energy or aptitude displayed in initiation of action. And some synonyms are action, ambition, drive, enterprise, hustle, among others. So, as an example at GSM, if you've been here long enough, you've heard about our core values. Our core values are not what we expect to accomplish every day. It's how we expect to go about it. It's guidelines for our behaviors, how we interact with each other, with our customers, with the community, with the public. It's just how it's the guidelines for how we're supposed to act. So a good leader is going to take initiative to act in the manner that these core values lay out without having to be told to do it. That's a short definition of initiative. Short definition of initiative, and why it's so important in leadership, especially at GSM. Okay, so I don't know, Mark Benton can't be on every job, every service call. Sean Messer can't be on every sales call. Scott Bradley can't be at every job all the time. Bob can't be on every roofing project all the time. Another way to put that would be decentralized command. Requires initiative on the part of everybody at the company. And Nicole can't answer every phone call that comes in. So it requires a level of initiative based on the foundation of what the organization you're involved with has laid out as proper behavior and expectations. I think we've done a decent job at GSM laying out our expectations. Could we be better at it? Yes. Could we be better at articulating our expectations? Probably. But for the most part, I think the people in this room and the people on the Zoom call know what our expectations are. Trying to think of an example. I wouldn't say unfortunate, but a recent example is these things we have on right now. Am I a fan of the mask personally? No. Why do I wear them? All the time when I'm around other people. Okay, I'm setting an example. What else? Okay. All right, come on. Why do we wear a mask? Why do I wear a mask anytime I'm around other people? Protect other people, right? Respect for other people. I'm sorry? Yeah, you can create action for others by doing it. It's the right thing to do. What about out there in the community? What about, are other people watching what we're doing? Okay. Occasionally, as leaders, we do things that we don't like for the good of the team, for the good of the organization, for the good of the people around us. That's one of the definitions, underlying definitions of leadership. You don't have to like it to go do it. That's an important one. Okay, and it goes back to that list of a big one will be set an example, integrity. So some, trying to think of another example. We do a lot of work that is unseen by our customers. They're not going on top of the roof. They're not in the attics. They're not in the crawl spaces. They don't see it. So the leadership of those teams and those individuals have to make sure that work is done in the manner that it's supposed to be done, the customer paid, and what the customer's expectations are. It's even more important when they can't see the work physically, or they don't understand what they're looking at anyway. That makes it even more important. So I reordered these a little bit because I wanted to finish with the initiative. Because the first book that we're going to give out and finish up with, actually, let me stop before I go to that, because that's what we're going to finish with. Anybody have any questions, comments, anything you want to, because we're winding up, we're going to finish on time here. Anybody have questions, comments, anything anybody wants to share?
James Lewis says to be self-aware of your impact on others. Let me see who else I got here. Charlie McGinnis says you can't ask anyone to do something you're not willing to do yourself.
Woo! Ooh, I don't like that one at all. But that's absolutely true. You didn't.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Billy Elmore says if you don't do the right thing, they won't do the right thing.
Ooh.
They won't do it.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah. So you're being watched all the time, and one of the great things I think about GSM is the people out in the community are watching you all the time. With the uniform on, you're driving in our trucks. We are viewed as leaders in the community. You're viewed as a leader in the community. You're viewed as a leader of your team. You're viewed as a leader at GSM. And frankly, you're not just viewed that way. That's the reality of what it is. And if you don't uphold wearing a mask as an example, then you're telling the people around you that it's okay not to do that. So any action you take that goes against our core values You're telling others that it's okay not to follow the core values. That is the hardship of being a good leader. That's the burden of being a good leader. It's easier not to be. It's easier not to be. All right, initiative. So our first book is called The Dog Poop Initiative. I know some of you have been here long enough, have seen that before, and we've gone through this once many years ago. But it is a terrific short read, and one that that tells a powerful story. And your first homework between now and the next 2 weeks is to read the Dog Poop Initiative. And that's correct. I just said poop in a meeting at work, and I'm 50 years old. Yes. I've been waiting for this moment for a very long time. But it is a story about taking initiative. And so the next session, we're going to talk about the dog poop initiative and what that means, and then taking initiative in general. Okay. So we are right on time. Any questions or comments before we hand the books out? For those of you on Zoom, we are going to get the books to your leaders, and make sure you get those books in your hands the next day or two, because we have a copy for everyone.